Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. Today I'm going to be answering a question I'm sure many of you have had, which is which gear sets are worth farming for in Wizard101. Now I know it's been like 3 months since I've uploaded a video. Whether they'll keep coming or not, that's up to me and you to decide, I guess. We'll see, but that's beside the point. I know it's been a while. We're just going to get into it. Now how I am ranking this, I'm doing this in a tier list format because I am the best at doing lazy content. I don't even know when the last time I've had a video with the actual game in it, but I'm sure it was at some point. Now how I'm doing this is I took every major gear set I could think of, put it into a tier list, and I'm going to rank it by how worth it is to farm. So for example, at the very top, we're probably going to get stuff like Waterworks, Darkmoor, the gear sets you know and love. Towards the bottom, we're going to be getting some pretty stinker gear sets that no one should ever farm for in their right mind. Now obviously not every gear is going to be on here. It's mostly the major gear sets, the things that you can think of, maybe some you didn't even know about. Basically gear sets that are widely accepted to be the most popular ones. If I missed any, please let me know in the comments below. I'll try to maybe make a pinned comment that I'll edit every once in a while of gear sets I missed. The only gear set that I can potentially think of on here that I didn't include that obviously I can think of is raid gear. And the reason why is that it's not very easily accessible for the average person. Like 90% of players probably doesn't even know that there are raids in the game, or if they do, they're not like the most popular thing, considering they're like probably a bit more challenging than the average content. So I didn't include that gear, but it is good gear. It's probably like an A or something. But without further ado, let's get into it. So starting off, we have one that most people probably hate, and that's the Krokotopian gear. Now the reason why I put this on here is because I felt like it was important, especially for new players. You may be like, what is this gear I'm getting while going through Krokotopia? And if you haven't gone through Krokotopia in a while, you might not even know. When they added gear sets to the game, like the actual statistical gear sets, where if you wear multiple pieces of the gear set, it gives you more value, they added gear sets to Krokotopia and Celestia. Now the Krokotopia gear set you get at level 15. It's pretty ass, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna put it like D tier. It's really not good. I would say for the level, equip it if you get it, but you get so many of them and it's never your school. It's not worth going out of your way to actually get, especially since Bizarre gear is probably better once you get to like level 20, 25. It's just not worth it. I figured I'd put it on here just to include it, just in case a new player clicks on this and is like, is this a good gear set? No, it's pretty bad actually, but you'll be getting a lot of it, and you're not allowed to sell it in the bazaar, so have fun quick selling it and or feeding it to your pet. Moving on, Kembaalung Village gear. Now this is interesting because Kembaalung Village is something that people probably don't know about as much because it's not good. It's like level 25. It's very much overshadowed by our next dungeon, Mount Olympus. It's not that good. There is some good things, don't get me wrong. There is a must get amulet for balance at level 25 that has a faint treasure card on it, which is super good for faint stacking, obviously. That's the main reason why it's in C tier. Everything else is pretty bad. I would say it's not worth farming, especially since Mount Olympus is next. Now, Mount Olympus is a gear I've struggled with in the past because I don't think it's necessarily 100% worth farming, because you can very easily get from the levels of 30 to 60 with only the Skyrim Hasta and Bizarre gear. It's really not needed, but obviously it's extremely helpful. You're not going to be struggling in any worlds if you have a full set of Zeus gear until level 60, where you replace it with Waterworks. I will say, in terms of the game's scaling, it definitely is meant for you to get Zeus gear, and it wants you to get Zeus gear. I would say that Zeus gear is definitely good, and that's why it's S tier. It is worth getting. Especially the Skyrim Hasta is obviously worth getting, considering that is going to be your best wand until Khrysalis now. Next up, we have Barkingham Palace. Now this is one that's interesting in the past because I've made a few videos on this gear set, because back in the day, like way back, maybe 2-3 years ago, I thought it was a good idea to farm this, honestly, because Barkingham Palace is quite a bit easier than Mount Olympus in terms of farming. Like, it's much shorter and the gear is solid, but I will say it's definitely not as worth farming as I used to think it was. I would put this at like a low B, high C. I'll leave it in B just for the sake of spreading out the tiers. But I would say Barkingham Palace isn't really that worth it. It's a marginal increase on gear compared to, say, Mount Olympus, where you're going from really low rank gear. Like, even if you have Kembaalung Village gear, it's not nearly as good as the Mount Olympus gear. It is a massive increase. Barkingham Palace gear is like meh. I would suggest you do Barkingham Palace once at level 40 just for the XP and potentially to get a piece of gear, but it's not worth farming it, especially considering you're gonna get way more people in team up in Mount Olympus than Barkingham overall. Next up is one of the interesting ones. This is what I wanted to talk about because there have been 2 new gear sets added to this game that most people probably don't know about or don't pay attention to, especially if you're a high level and haven't made a low level in a while, and that's Dragonspyre World gear and Khrysalis World gear. Now right now we're talking about Dragonspyre World gear. This gear is a solid A tier because while I don't think it's necessarily worth farming the entire set, it is potentially worth it to do Malistaire once or twice just to see what you get. Now this gear set, I can't stress, is really good. The Athaemen ring actually gives damage, which for other Athaemen rings, you wouldn't get a good one until level 56. And even then, the 56 one isn't necessarily as good as the Dragonspyre one because the Dragonspyre one has better gear slots and overall it's just pretty good. On top of that, the gear sets in of itself are really good. Some of them give Pierce, which is also amazing, especially at an early enough level as Dragonspyre, level 50. I would say this is solid. Actually, I'm going to move it down to a B. Now, I know you're like, why'd you move it down? It's because honestly, I will say, is it as worth farming this as our upcoming gear sets? No. It doesn't do anything that Waterworks isn't going to do in 10 levels, I will say. So comparatively to Waterworks, it's not worth farming, but it is solid. The only thing I'm going to say, and the reason why I moved it down to B especially, you're not going to get people helping you and team up to farm this gear set as a low level especially. A lot of people aren't going to just be randomly teaming up to go do Malistaire. Obviously, you might get some people in the team up kiosk, but overall, not nearly as much as some of these other gear sets. So I'm going to put it in a B. But it is solid. It's definitely gear that comparatively is better than most other gear sets on this tier list, I would say. Next up, everyone's loathed gear set. I put this on mostly for the meme. This is an F tier. Celestia gear, like the Celestian Totality set. I don't know if that's what it's called, but you know the gear. The no auction gear that's dropped really frequently in Celestia that you cannot sell in the bazaar. It is bad. It was introduced at the same exact time as the Krokotopia gear. The only reason Croc is higher is because this gear set is like the shit you scrape off your boot. It is that bad. Comparatively, it's way worse than the Dragonspyre World gear I just talked about, and even worse than that, in 6 levels you're getting Wintertusk Crafted, and in 10 levels you're getting Waterworks. So it is just overall bad. I will say I am over-exaggerating a little, an eensy-weensy little bit, but any player worth their salt has gear better than the Celestian set by the time you get to Celestia. Easy F tier. This gear set's garbage. Garbo. Not even worth talking about, honestly. I just put it in there for the memes. Next, we have Wintertusk Crafted, and this is going to be an interesting one because I'm putting this into A tier, and I'm going to also put Waterworks, I'm going to put Waterworks into S tier just right now. Wintertusk Crafted is interesting because Wintertusk Crafted comes at a time where it is right before Waterworks. So you expect it to be comparable to Waterworks, and it really is. I will say you can easily get to Darkmoor, which is the next kind of milestone gear, like Waterworks at 60, Darkmoor at 100. You can easily get to Darkmoor with this level 56 Wintertusk Crafted gear. On top of that, the hat, I believe, gives another blade, which can always be useful, especially in boss fights and blade stacking. Very, very useful. I will say, obviously, the stats leave a little bit to be desired, especially defense. Like, you're getting about half the defense you're getting with Waterworks gear with Wintertusk Crafted. But I have made videos on this in the past, and I am a staunch defender of Wintertusk Crafted gear. I think, honestly, not enough players use it. I would say it is, like, one of the better things you can do to get to Darkmoor, and there have been wizards, like my Myth Wizard, for example, I used it all the way up to Darkmoor gear. I just think it's really, really good, really solid, and especially worth getting if you have crafting. If you don't already have crafting, maybe wait for Waterworks, but if you do, solid, and it helps you do Waterworks. It's not that hard to craft either. Next up, we have Waterworks, and obviously I already put it in S tier. What can I say about this that you probably don't already know? Waterworks is a milestone gear set in this game. If you're not getting Waterworks at level 60, you are intentionally shooting yourself in the foot for future worlds. Obviously, you can, as I said, you can use Wintertusk Crafted instead, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that Wintertusk Crafted is better than Waterworks. Waterworks is the most solid gear set in probably the entire game in terms of statistics for that level. In every school, you get either a solid amount of accuracy or power pip, you get a massive amount of damage, except for ice, and you get a decent amount of resist. Overall, S tier, I don't know what to say beyond that. Next up is Zigazag, and I put this on here just because the rest of the 4 dungeons are, so I might as well. This one's probably a C tier. The robe is worth getting on most schools, but its drop rate is so low to the point where I don't even know whether it makes it there. In fact, I'm gonna put it in a D tier because the hat and boots, definitely not worth getting. They suck, but the robe is pretty good, especially for Storm. The robe is probably the best Storm robe until Darkmoor. It's at least not an F. It's a C. It's a C. Last change, I promise. It's a C. Next up is Atlantia, and this one kind of makes me sad because I really wish it was better, but Atlantia is a D. Atlantia gear is just overall a net worse than Waterworks. I think what it was trying to do and what it was trying to do at the time when it came out is it was like, hey, look at me, I'm quirky, I have Pierce. And Pierce is good, don't get me wrong, especially later game, Pierce is an amazing stat to have. But when you're losing out on like 20 net damage for maybe about 10 to 15 Pierce, no, it's not worth it. Especially considering Atlantia is a difficult dungeon. Like, it's not the easiest dungeon to do, it takes longer than Mount Olympus is going to take you to do. You're not going to get as many people helping you with it. It's just not worth getting. In fact, it's only above F tier just because I refuse to put anything in the same tier as the Celestian gear set. It's fine, but if you're farming Atlantia gear, you have something probably wrong with you. You have a few screws loose. You need to get some help. Next up, Tartarus. Now, Tartarus gear is honestly one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video, because I really like talking about obscure gear sets, and I don't talk about them enough, right? You see all these gear guides online that are like the best gear set in 2023 for Wizard101, best complete gear guide, whatever. A lot of those gear guides neglect to mention your alternative options. Now, I don't think Tartarus is amazing good, but the gear, especially the ones that drop from Zeus, like the damage gear, is a solid alternative to Darkmoor. It's not good, not worth farming at all. In fact, I'm putting this right into D tier where it belongs, but it is worth talking about the other alternatives because a lot of these dungeons, most people probably don't even consider. I like exploring the alternatives. Actually, I'm going to move Tartarus up to C for one reason alone, and that's the Blade of Felled Titan. Because if you don't know, Cronus, the secret boss at the beginning of Tartarus, drops a blade called the Blade of Felled Titan, an athame, sorry, not a blade, and this athame gives you plus 15% damage, and it's probably the best athame you can get now until I don't even know when, because if you didn't know, they changed it so that the Morgantha theme is not nearly as good anymore. Like those old Morgantha themes you have in your bank, keep them forever because those are not dropped by Morgantha anymore. The new ones kind of suck ass, but overall, I think it's worth talking about the fact that that Blade of Felled Titan is so important. Honestly, even gonna go up to B tier because that's how important it is. Now this next one is another reason I really wanted to make this tier list, because Khrysalis World gear is something that was added with the test realm last year, like, I don't know, maybe spring test realm, fall test realm of last year, winter, I don't know. The point is, Khrysalis World gear is really, really good. I'm giving it an A tier because this is an alternative to Darkmoor, and that's really interesting to me. They decided to give you an alternative to farming a full set of Darkmoor gear at level 100 with the Khrysalis World gear. The wands especially are really, really good. Now, where does this gear set kind of fall? Athame and Ring, not very good. They're both kind of bad. Ring is okay, but the Alpha and Omega Ring, which I haven't even talked about, but that falls under Mount Olympus. Alpha and Omega Ring is just flat better than pretty much all the other rings from this gear set. But the hat, robe, and boots, pretty solid when compared to Darkmoor gear. So definitely worth considering at the very least. And overall, the best thing in the gear set is the wand. This gear set has finally added a wand that overtakes the Skyrim Hasta at a reasonable level. Well, not a reasonable level. You should have one at level 50, which Dragonspyre World does. But the Skyrim Hasta used to be uncontested, the best wand until like level 120, 130. Now the Khrysalis World kind of comes in and says no. All the wands have a solid amount of pierce, gives a solid amount of damage and crit. Most A tier thing on this list. It's really good. A good alternative to Darkmoor. Next up on the list, we have Darkmoor, and another one of those benchmark gear sets. It's really, really good. To this day, Storm's best robe is still the Darkmoor robe. because they broke it. A lot of these robes are so good for the side stats they give. For example, Storm's robe gives 25 accuracy, which is enough for Storm to only need 5 more accuracy before they'd never fizzle again. Honestly, the weakest part of the Darkmoor set is the boots, because the boots aren't particularly good. They're like fine, but they aren't the best, and that can easily be remedied by farming for just any other set of boots. Honestly, it's like not that hard to get a set of boots that's better. Now, where this falls especially is that there's no wand in particular that's really good with the Darkmoor set. The Malistaire one is really trash, doesn't give any damage, but this gear set has the Yevgeny Athame, which is really good. It's now technically the best Athame around this level because Morganth Athames don't exist anymore. And you have the Aphrodite rings, which are a pain in the ass to farm. Don't recommend farming those. But what can I say about Darkmoor that you don't already know? Darkmoor is really good S tier. Now, one thing I want to quickly talk about that I could think about that I didn't really have a tier for, like I didn't have an icon for, is the housing dungeon gauntlet things. Basically Rattlebones and Crocopatra, because you may be wondering, like, aren't those alternatives to Darkmoor? Yes, those are alternatives to Darkmoor, but are they worth farming? No, not really. I would probably put them in a C or a D tier, because yes, the Crocopatra hat is flat better than Darkmoor. Yes, the robe situationally is better than Darkmoor. Is it enough that I think it's worth going out of your way to do these like really challenging housing gauntlets for? No, not really. I would put those probably at C tier. I just thought it was worth talking, and little kind of addendum to this after the Darkmoor. But let's move on. Ooh, now we're getting to the interesting one, because this is Dragoon. This was the best gear set in the game for the better part of about 4 years, I think. No, 4 years is way too long, maybe 2 or 3. This was the gear that you farmed in the catacombs. Now, why is this one kind of spicy to talk about? Because Dragoon is not worth farming anymore. In fact, I'm going to put it right in D tier, because Dragoon is not good. The only thing about Dragoon that is still worth farming is probably the amulet on maybe Fire, because it has the animation skip, or Death or Life, who if you don't have Ship of Fools or Ratspin, in which if you don't have those, go farm for them. You're kind of slacking here. But Dragoon gear used to be so good, top of the line, but because of how hard it is to farm, it just has been outpaced entirely by these other gear sets. Honestly, you can go with Darkmoor gear all the way up until Merciless, where Merciless gear will automatically be way better. Dragoon gear just isn't that worth it anymore, honestly. I'm sure some people will still say to farm it, but it's not worth farming. In the time that it's going to take you to get the Dragoon gear that you want, you could probably have quested at least through Karamelle and be close to Merciless gear compared to where you would be if you farmed for Dragoon. Next, we have the Karamelle gear. I put this on just because I know it technically counts as a gear set. It's like a B tier. The wands are really good. I know that the boots are used in some meta gear sets, or not meta, but like decent gear sets. It's like fine gear, but compared to some of the better gear on here, it's just not really worth farming that much, especially since you need to do the Divine Paradox fight, which is not the easiest in the world. So I'll put it in B tier. Next, we have Merciless, and this is probably an easy S tier. Merciless is really easy to farm, and it's ridiculously good. This gear is only slightly outpaced by the Aeon gear, I would say. It's like, or marginally worse than the Aeon gear, and it's really easy to get as far as I know. Unless it's changed with the difficulty update, I don't think it has been. It's really easy to get it in the final fight and potentially spam crowns in the chest if you want to, or just do it. I don't know if the skip has been fixed. If it hasn't been, still a really easy fight. But my point is, Merciless is really good. I think the only thing that's like iffy is the robe, but I'm not entirely sure, because they added Power Pip to this. If you didn't know, the reason why Merciless used to be bad was because it didn't have enough Power Pip for you to get up to 100%. But recently they made it so that it has Power Pip. It has like Power Pip and accuracy. It's just really solid, unless it's been changed, in which case, call me ignorant, but I'm pretty sure Merciless is still really good. I think it's right behind Aeon, and Aeon, obviously S tier. Aeon is currently the best gear set in the game. It's obviously worth farming if you have the time. I still haven't farmed it because I just am too lazy. So this is my completed kind of ranking which gear sets are worth getting in Wizard101. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did I miss anything? Let me know as well. If you have any ideas for other videos you want to see me do, go ahead, but otherwise that's it. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Adios.